Picture this,
Welcome
it's
to
Thanksgiving
The
morning, November
Explainer.
24th,
I'm your
2016.
host, and
After
today
a massive,
we're unpacking
frantic
a case that
22-day manhunt,
absolutely
a motorist
captivated
flags
the
down
nation,
the California highway
completely
patrol near
manipulated the
Interstate
justice
5.
system, and
They
really
found
challenged everything we thought
34-year-old
we knew
Sherri
about victimhood.
Papini, and her
This
condition
is
was
the
just
anatomy of a
horrifying.
fabricated abduction.
She was emaciated,
Okay,
weighing barely
let's get right into
87
it.
pounds.
Picture
She literally
this,
had a
it's
chain
Thanksgiving
around
morning,
her waist,
November 24th,
bindings on her wrists and
2016.
ankles,
After
her
a
hair had been
massive,
violently
frantic
chopped off,
22-day
and a
manhunt,
blurred message,
a motorist
the word
flags
Exodus,
down the
was
California
literally
highway
branded
patrol
into
near
her right
Interstate
shoulder.
5.
It's
It's
the
the
kind
kind
of
of
visceral discovery that
Sherri
just
Papini,
stops you
and
in
her
your
condition
tracks.
was just
To the rest of the
horrifying.
world, she was
this
emaciated,
miraculous
weighing
survivor of
barely
a brutal
87
kidnapping.
pounds. She literally
But the
had a chain
truth?
around her waist,
Well, the
bindings on
truth
her
was
wrists and
far more
ankles, her
complex
hair had been
and
violently
frankly
chopped
far
off,
more
and a
deceptive.
blurred message, the word
So,
Exodus,
how
was
exactly did a
literally
harrowing
branded
tale
into
of
her right
survival
shoulder.
turn into
It's
one
the
of the
kind
most
of visceral
elaborate and
discovery that just
expensive
stops
hoaxes of
you
the
in your
21st
tracks.
century?
To the rest of the
Okay,
world, she
let's
was
dive
this
into this and
miraculous
see how
survivor
the
of a
whole thing
brutal
unraveled.
kidnapping.
But
Part
the
1,
truth?
the supermom
Well, the truth was
disappearance.
far more complex
To really
and frankly
grasp the
far more
massive scale
deceptive.
of this deception,
So,
we have to
how
jump
exactly
back to
did
the
a
very
harrowing tale of
beginning.
survival
The setting
turn
is
into one of the
November
most elaborate and
2016
expensive
in a
hoaxes
quiet
of the
residential
21st century?
neighborhood near Redding,
Okay,
California.
let's dive into
Sherri
this
went
and see
missing
how the
and then
whole thing
miraculously
unraveled.
reappeared in
Part
2016.
1.
But
The
it took until
supermom.
2020 for a DNA breakthrough to shift the investigation, and it wasn't until 2022, over 5 years later, that federal authorities finally made an arrest and secured a guilty plea. The 2022 federal criminal complaint represents half a decade of immense resources. For 5 long years, law enforcement issued dozens of search warrants and tracked down literally thousands of tips. And all the while, the public was terrified of kidnappers who simply didn't exist. The sheer weight of that official complaint represents thousands of hours of wasted police work. And you know what sparked all that wasted police work? A highly calculated crime scene. On the afternoon she vanished, her husband tracked her phone to a nearby intersection. Her cell phone and earbuds were just neatly placed on the ground, right next to strands of her own hair. It was like a visual cue deliberately crafted for the media, immediately suggesting a violent struggle and cementing her status in the press as the abducted supermom. Part 2. Unraveling the hoax. But eventually, the physical evidence simply wasn't adding up. Let's look at how forensic reality started to dismantle the myth. Now, what's really interesting about this contrast is the stark difference between her manufactured claims and her actual, very mundane reality. She claimed she was abducted at gunpoint while jogging by 2 masked Hispanic women. The truth? She voluntarily got into a rental car with her ex-boyfriend, James Reyes, and took a 600-mile road trip down to his home in Costa Mesa. And those extreme details of her captivity? Also completely fabricated. She told investigators she was locked in a freezing closet, tortured, and fed nothing but tortillas and rice. But the reality is, she was just hanging out in her ex-boyfriend's spare bedroom for 22 days. That severe weight loss was from voluntarily starving herself, and those horrific injuries, including that brand on her shoulder, were actually inflicted by her ex-boyfriend at her own direct request, all just to sell the hoax. Now, you might be wondering, how does someone orchestrate something this extreme? Psychological experts who analyze the case point to a sort of perfect storm of pathology. They identify traits of cluster B personality disorders. We're talking narcissistic behaviors driven by a need for special status, histrionic cravings for emotional drama, and borderline traits. And there's a serious pattern here. The forensic history shows police reports of Sherri harming herself and blaming others dating all the way back to 2003. Part 3. The ex-boyfriend and DNA. So, how did the FBI finally break through all these layers of deception? Well, it turns out this wasn't some spontaneous breakdown. It was a meticulously planned operation. Phone records revealed that Sherri and James Reyes had been communicating since December 2015, almost a whole year before she vanished. They even switched to prepaid burner phones to hide their tracks. On the morning of November 2nd, she texted him to coordinate the pickup, and for the next 22 days, she simply stayed indoors to avoid being seen. Let's move to and see how this builds, because the forensic methodology used here is absolutely fascinating. Back in 2016, investigators found unknown male DNA on the clothing Sherri was wearing when she was found. For years, it just sat in a database, but in 2020, a familial DNA search pointed to a relative of James Reyes. The FBI started surveilling Reyes, and they eventually pulled a discarded green tea bottle right out of his trash. And guess what? The DNA on that bottle was a perfect match to the DNA on Sherri's clothing. In August 2020, investigators brought Sherri in. They sat her down, warned her that lying to them was a federal crime, and then laid out the irrefutable DNA evidence proving she was with Reyes. Her response? Astonishing denial.
She sat right there in the interrogation room and insisted, "There's no way it's him, because he loves me. We were friends." Even faced with absolute scientific truth, she absolutely refused to drop the hoax.
Part 4. The true cost.
While the bizarre details of this case are undeniably captivating, we really have to ground this explainer in why this actually matters. This wasn't a victimless lie. It caused profound, real-world harm. Perhaps the most damaging sociocultural impact was her description of her imaginary captors. She provided details for a fabricated FBI sketch of 2 Hispanic women, essentially weaponizing racial stereotypes. This misdirected authorities for years and sparked a pervasive, heavy fear in the local Latino community, who suddenly found themselves viewed with suspicion for a crime that quite literally never happened. And then there's the staggering financial toll: $300,000. When Sherri was finally sentenced in 2022, she was ordered to pay over $300,000 in restitution. That money was meant to compensate for the massive public resources, the multi-state police investigations, and the sheer absurd cost of searching for a ghost. The crucial point here is understanding the sheer audacity of her mail fraud charges. She didn't just lie to get attention, she actively profited from it. She defrauded the California Victim Compensation Board out of more than $30 grand. She billed the state for therapy sessions to treat her fake trauma. She made the state pay for her ambulance ride on the day she dramatically reappeared. And get this, she even used victim funds to buy new blinds for her house. You can't make this stuff up.
Part 5. Changing the story again.
Now, you'd think a federal conviction and a prison sentence would be the end of it, right? Nope. This is a story that simply refuses to end. Let's look at the modern timeline. In September 2022, Sherri was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. She was released a bit early in August 2023. Fast forward to May 2025, and she's right back in the spotlight, starring in a brand new docuseries with a radically different narrative. And this brilliantly illustrates the ongoing manipulation. In this new media campaign, she is entirely walking back her 2022 guilty plea. She looks straight into the camera and states, "I was taken against my will. I lied about the identity of my captor." She's now pointing the finger squarely at James Reyes, claiming he was actually the one who abducted her. This new revisionist narrative claims that she was subjected to non-consensual torture by her ex-boyfriend because she was trying to end an emotional affair. But here is the major problem. This directly contradicts the hard forensic findings. Medical examiners and the FBI already proved conclusively that her wounds were consistent with deliberate, controlled, self-inflicted injuries. The evidence shows she was a completely willing participant in staging her own captivity. The anatomy of this hoax really forces us to look in the mirror. When someone weaponizes the archetype of the perfect victim to completely manipulate the justice system, law enforcement, and the media, how do we separate cold, hard forensic truth from the sensational stories society so desperately wants to believe? It's a question that challenges our collective biases. So, what do you think about the media's role in fueling the supermom myth? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and remember,